This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and good evening as per your time zone. So this is Roshan. So we are here for a workshop on microservices, Docker, and containers. Okay, we'll get started now. So this is something about me. I have around 14 years of experience, mostly predominantly into performance engineering, Java and Python development. I'm also a certified cloud professional and been also involved into automation as well using Java, Python, PL SQL, shell scripting, Ansible as well. I'm currently working as a principal performance engineer and SRE. Okay, so this will be the agenda of our workshop today. We'll be going from very basics. So no need to worry that you need to have any prerequisite information or knowledge. Nothing. It will be just a very basic session on the monolithic architecture. Okay, I would request everyone to be on mute. And if you have any questions, feel free to write anything on the chat window. I have my chat window open in my another screen, so I can go over your questions and I can address that. Please, thank you. Okay, so this will be the agenda. So we'll go over monolithic overview, the architecture, how do we work with monolithic applications? What do we mean by monolithic applications, then its advantages and disadvantages, and then microservices. Why do we need microservices? What's the architecture and what's its advantages or disadvantages over monolithic? Characteristics of monolithic architecture, its advantages and disadvantages. And then we'll have a comparison. Once we understand both the monolithic and microservices, we will compare both, and then we'll understand where do we run these microservices, the runtime environment for the microservices, and we'll introduce something called container engine, and we'll be talking about Docker and what do we mean by Docker container lifecycle. We'll understand first the installation of Docker. What do we have? What's Docker? We'll understand that, and few common operations. We'll talk about that. So this will be the agenda of our workshop today. Okay. So okay, so when I say monolithic application, right? So what I exactly mean that mostly like we all work on three-tier application, right? We have a presentation layer, then we have application layer where all our logic resides, and then we have a data layer where all the data resides, that the database server that we have, and presentation layer is our web server, and application server is the logic server that we have like Tomcat or JBoss or WebLogic or WebSphere that we have application layer. So when I say monolithic, what I mean that all my application functionality, all my code logic resides on the application layer here. Okay, let me just use a laser pointer. So all my application logic, let's say I have a bookstore app, for example, or any app. So let's say I have four modules, four application, four sub modules there: accounts, shipping, payments, and inventory. Let's assume that. And when we have all the logic for this module, all these modules in one layer, that's application layer. That type of architecture we call monolithic applications. Okay, so to be that should be the simplest definition. Okay, so all your if your all the logic resides in the application server, that's the monolithic applications. Okay, what's the advantages? So since all my code resides on the application server, just one server, it's a very single unit of deployment. I can deploy all my code at once. I don't need, because all my codes reside on the same application server, I can deploy very easily. And I can have my IDE support as well. For all the modules that I have, I can have the IDE support. Like I can use, if I'm writing my application in Java, let's say, then I have like IDE like Eclipse to support all my modules that I have, that my application is comprised of. So these are the advantages of monolithic applications. But if you see this slide, there are lots more disadvantages that we have with monolithic applications. Okay. I request everyone to be on mute, please. Okay. So disadvantages, if I talk about, so a lot more. Like it could be often very large. Okay. Because if my all the code, because let's say I'm just showing up there, I have 4 modules here. I could have 20 modules, and 20 modules means a lot of code base, right? It could be often very large. Mostly it is large. If my business is doing well, if I have that much of user requirement, I mostly end up having a very large monolithic uh, uh, application. Okay. Technology dependency on initial decision. That's one of the major disadvantages. Let's say I started up my business, my application, let's say with accounts, and I have selected, let's go with Java. Let's start writing the code in Java. And let's say my business is expanding, I'm ramping up, I'm scaling my applications, and I'm introducing much more features, new features like payments or shipping inventory. I have to stick with the Java itself. I cannot go and change it with any high performing language depend which suits my any specific let's say module. I have to stick with Java itself. So that's the disadvantages: technology dependency on initial decision. I cannot change that later. Once I decided to write my application in one technology, I cannot change that. Okay. And implemented it's implemented using single development stack, as I mentioned, same thing. So I cannot change that later. And frequent deployments are not practical. That is the reason mostly you would have seen if you are working in agile kind of setup, and where most of the companies are still using agile, and they are using monolithic application, many mostly. So frequent deployments are not practical, right? We deploy quarterly. We keep on accumulating the bugs. We keep on fixing it, and then we deploy all at once, like let's say quarterly, and then we get a major release. We don't deploy for every bug on daily basis. It's not practically not possible because the application is so huge, right? And one of the very important disadvantages is here that if you have need to scale the entire application stack. Let's say you are observing as being performance testing or engineer, you observe that let's say one of the module, let's say this is a shipping. I call it search. Let's say search. If search functionality, let's assume any e-commerce application like Amazon or Flipkart, where most of the users just go and search for the product. The search functionality is getting invoked more often than any other submodules, right? And you want to just scale up the resources on the search module, let's say only search, because you see that lot there are, if there are 1,000 users at any given point of time, there are 700 users, almost 60 to 70% they're using just the search functionality, and 30% there are few are doing payments, and there are few here and there. So if you want to scale just the search, the resource for the search functionality, search module, you cannot do that. You have to, if you want to scale up the search, let's say, because you are seeing that there are more user load on the search and it's growing, you have to increase the entire application stack. Like on the application server itself, you have to scale up the application server itself. You cannot just scale up the resource for the search module or for the any shipping module, which is having more user hits. You cannot do that. So you have to, if you see that let's say shipping or search is having more user hits, and performance is not good, let's say with a certain configuration, you have to increase the entire application server resource. You have to use more CPU, more memory. There could be some other disk IO. You need to make sure. Okay, you need to make sure that you cannot do it just for one module. You have to do it for the entire application server. So need to scale the entire application stack. That's what I'm meaning. Even if you just need the more resource for one module, you cannot do that. And that leads to the introduction of microservices. And that is the region here. most of the companies are developing, they have understood the importance of microservices, and they're moving, even they're migrating their monolithic application to microservices. They're trying to, so what is microservices? They're trying to break the same application. Let's say the here accounts, shipping, payments, and inventory, they have in on the same application server. So they're trying to break their application and split it, and they would like to deploy all their submodules separately. That's what microservices do. They're making it independent. Here, in this case, what's happening? Let's say I have. I'm just let's take about this example. Four modules in one application. Here in monolithic application, I'm calling. Let's say I'm writing methods, 10 methods for accounts section logic. 10 methods call. Just for example, I can call those 10 methods anywhere and everywhere. There is high dependency on the code. I can reuse the code, whatever I'm writing for the account section in the shipping. I can call the function. I can use it in the payments, inventory, anywhere and everywhere. The disadvantages comes here. Let's say if your one of the modules goes down, accounts goes down for some or the other reason, for small bug, accounts module is not working. It may impact your other modules as well, because the code is dependent. You are calling the functions everywhere and anywhere. There are high chance that your the entire application can go down. Okay, just if you have issue with one module, also a small bug can bring your application down in monolithic applications. And that is why you don't want to have that kind of a setup. Like for example, let's say I have a mobile application, let's say Ola or Uber app. There are a lot of functionalities there. Simple functionality is notification. If you book a cab, you get notified. Okay, so if notification that is not working, it doesn't mean you cannot book a cab, right? So they are microservices. So your code for one module doesn't depend on the other module. They are independent in the case of microservices, and that's the advantages of that. Okay, so I just introduced the microservices, and so creating, what is this microservices? So creating smaller and multiple component services which are built to handle a very specific concern. So I'm trying to make my same application. Okay, I'm not changing anything. Code is there, fine. I'm making sure that my function in whichever I'm writing for the one module doesn't get called to other modules. I'm trying to make it independent. That's all I'm doing in the case of microservices. So when I say that most of the companies are migrating towards monolithic to microservices, means they are just making sure that their modules are independent. So even if one module goes down, let's say one module goes down here, accounts, it doesn't mean that people cannot search for the product, right? Or cannot do shipping or any other modules. Okay, that's what I mean by microservices. So if you want to design an application that is multi-language, I'll talk about that. So just for now, just know creating smaller and multiple component services which are built to handle specific concern. Multiple services make up the application. When you combine all your submodules, that will make your application. That's the microservices basic definition. Okay. If I talk about the architecture here, you have all the answers in the architecture and how it is possible and what's the advantages you get when you use microservices. So this is a cloud implementation. I'm using API gateway. You can have API gateway in any cloud service provider like AWS or Azure or GCP, any cloud service, but they all have this service API gateway where they can create API, they can develop API, build API. And then you have this uh, application server that I was talking about, application server. Now you just imagine that on the application server you have split your all your uh, modules and you are making it independent. That's what you're trying to do when you're going microservices. You can have one microservices being written in Java, You can have another microservices being written in Python and another in Go. It's such flexibility because you're not calling, you don't need to stick with the same initial decision on the technology. You can use any other technology which suits your particular module of your application development, and which is good for the performance side, from the performance point of view. So you can go ahead and do that in the case of microservices, but it was not possible in the case of monolithic applications. And then you can use multiple database as well, since you have multiple microservices. When I say microservices, so in layman term, what do you mean by it's the submodule of your bigger application. That's what it is. Okay, submodule of your bigger application. That's it. It is in the microservices. That's what it means, microservices. Then you can, there are a lot of ways to develop it using Spring Boot. People are developing nowadays. Spring Boot is in the fashion. That's what they are relying to develop microservices in. But we'll understand more from a performance point of view, that how it is deployed and how can we make sure the performance is better. That's on the development side, that they're using Spring Boot. Okay, so you can use different databases as well. So to sum it up, that you can break your application server, the logic, into various submodules, and you can create multiple microservices. Okay, and then you can use any other language, any different language to create your module. This is let's say module one, whatever, like payment, or you can write in Java. There is some other shipping you can write in Python. There were other things you can write in other language, and then these microservices needs to communicate. They communicate through REST API, because that needs interaction has to be there, right? So they communicate through REST API, and that's how it goes. So even if my one of the microservices goes down, let's say shipping goes down, it will not impact your other modules. So that is the reason, if in your mobile app, if notification bell is not working, it doesn't mean that you cannot book a cab. That's a simple one microservices for the notification, that you get notified when you book the cab. You get the notification from the REST API, a call. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you cannot book a cab, but in the case of monolithic applications, you once, even if for the one of the module, let's say for any small bug, it's there and it's not working, it may impact largely the entire application, because we are dependent. Code is being called anywhere and everywhere, uh, right? So that's about the microservices. So what we call here, so when I say microservices, so I'm trying to make my modules here autonomous and specialized. That's what I'm trying to do here in the case of microservices. I'm making it autonomous, independent, and specialized for a particular purpose. So now you can see that there is accounts, shipping, payments, and inventory. They are they interact with each other. It's not like they do not interact with each other. They interact with REST API calls, but the code base is independent. Account, whatever the code is being written for the accounts module, is not being called in the shipping module. Same thing goes for the other modules as well. Okay, so I hope everyone has understood the definition part of it. In layman terms, I'm talking very simple. So if you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. Okay. Okay. So what's the advantages you get? A lot more advantages. A lot more. I have talked about these things. So let's say what all I have talked about. Easy deployment, obviously. So I have now smaller applications. I can deploy very frequently. Obviously, I can deploy very frequently and easily. I do not need to build the entire code, because to deploy the application, I need to build the code, right? That's the process, development process. Once the developer writes the code, they need to build the code for any compile time error or runtime errors, right? So now, since I have broken down my entire big monolithic application into smaller pieces, submodules, now it's very easy to deploy my application, right? Reusable code, right? So within one microservices, they can again call it. they can they can uh, they can call within one microservices, okay, but not between two microservices. The code should be independent, but within one microservices, yeah, they can they can reuse the code. They don't need to create it again. That's the functionality. Technological freedom, as I was mentioning, one microservices in another technology being developed, one module, other module being developed in other technology, and then just it's just about how do they communicate. They communicate through REST API, as simple as that. So technological freedom I have got, easy deployment, reusable code, resilience. Obviously, right, that was the entire motivation, that if my one of the application goes down, it will not impact my the main application or the other modules. My application will be highly resilient, right? It will be highly reliable, highly available, right? So those are the advantages of microservices, right? And then flexible scaling, as I was mentioning, right, now I need to scale up only the search functionality, let's say only one module. I know that one this is the module, this is the application or method which is being called a lot more times, right? Hits is more. You can look into that. If you go to production and you analyze the logs, you can understand which application is being, which module is being called more often, right? We can also guess, right, in the e-commerce application, most of the people do search functionality, right? And so those kind of aspect I'm talking about. So I can do flexible scaling. I don't need to scale up the entire application server. I just need to make sure that I have that microservices more number of times. So when I talk about containers and pods, Kubernetes, that's when you will understand more about it. That I can just scale up that particular microservices. I can have more number of pods only for that microservices to accommodate the extra user load. So I can do it only for a specific microservices. First of all, you need to understand that how, where do we run these microservices. I'll talk about that. And then once you understand that, basically we run microservices in containers. Right? I was about to explain that, but I need to explain this now. I need to mention this. So we that's the runtime environment of microservices. So I can have more containers for those microservices, so that they accommodate, they take more resource and they serve more requests, right? I can do that. Flexible scaling is very much part of the microservices. So they are the advantages here. Okay, so a lot more disadvantages. Okay, okay, what is that? Could you please API gateway jobs? That's not part of this right now. BVS. Okay, API gateway. API gateway, I can just explain that it is, we use API gateway to build API. Okay. You can go to any cloud service provider and you can just type API gateway, go to AWS console, type API gateway. You can develop your own API. That's what API gateway are used for, okay, basically. Okay. Coming to microservices, the topic here is the microservices, and if I talk about API gateway more, it will be lost this whole workshop. Okay. So let's stick to our agenda here. Okay, so I was talking about a lot of advantages of microservices all the way. Obviously, it has a lot, but it's not like that it doesn't have disadvantages. Okay, it has few, but the disadvantages are such that it can be worked out. It depends on you and how do you implement those microservices. So it can be worked out, those disadvantages. Like, for example, a duplicate code, obviously, you are trying to make the microservices independent, right? That's what you're trying to do. Obviously, there could be a chance that you need to rewrite the code for multiple modules, right? You may need to rewrite the code. There could be a code duplication. Okay. I request everyone to go on mute. Uh, okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so duplicate code, obviously, right? I'm trying to make my microservices independent. That's what I'm trying to do, independent. So there could be a scenario that there could be a common code base, that there has to be a code which is there, which I'm writing for the accounts module, and I have to repeat the code, because I cannot call the functions which are being written in accounts module to shipping module or any other module. I cannot call that like as I was doing with monolithic. So there could be a scenario where I need to duplicate the code, right? But again, this can be worked out if you know that there are 70% of the code, like let's say, of the code is duplicate. 70% of the code is duplicate. Let's assume this case. Then why to have two microservices that combine these two microservices and call it as one microservices? So things like that, it can be worked out. So it depends on the architecture, that how many microservices you need and how much code base they share. If they share more than a certain percentage of code base, you don't want to have two separate microservices, right? It's not a good thing. If 70% of the code is common, why do you want to have two just combine these two and just have it one microservices and deploy it all at once in the container? Okay, that's what. So the disadvantages are something that which can be worked out. Duplicate code, uh, maintenance. Yes, if there are a lot more microservices, there I was just maintaining my application server. Every in my monolithic, everything was deployed at in one place. Here I have multiple microservices. Multiple microservices mean I have multiple containers, right? Obviously we need to maintain it, right? We have so we need to look for all those microservices, and there is maintenance activity. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, so you don't need to create more microservices. The idea is don't create unnecessary microservices. As I was mentioning, don't create. If you're going microservice, doesn't mean you will break your monolithic application tear apart. Be sensible and logical when you are migrating from monolithic to microservices architecture, right? So it will be easy to maintain. If you have a few microservices, let's say 10, fine, you can manage that, right? If you have 50, 100, then you difficult to manage, okay? So maintenance is the problem. Spawning, right? Same thing. If you have spawning means if you have too many microservices, okay, a lot more microservices, a lot more containers, and if you're thinking about scaling up the containers or the pods, depending on the user requirement, there could be a case that it could be a problem. Okay, so be sensible, be logical in when you're going monolithic to microservices. Don't have unnecessary microservices created. Just have a limited number of microservices which you can manage, which makes sense. Okay, it should be logical. Okay, so if you have many microservices, spawning could be the case, but you have container orchestration engine like Kubernetes to take care of spawning. If you have a lot more microservices, there are container orchestration engine. You don't need to do anything manually for all your pods. How to scale up, there are things. Your pods, your containers can be auto scaled. If there is a requirement, user load is increasing, it can be auto scaled. So okay, so things like that. So Kubernetes is there. I'm gonna use a huge topic, Kubernetes, but just to sum it up, that you can auto scale your pods, containers, if there is more user load. Cluster can be auto scale, where your pods gets host, like you deploy your pods on the instances on the EC2 or any servers, right? You can scale up the servers also. If you need much more number of pods being created to accommodate that extra load, you can have a threshold. Let's say if your CPU increases this much of percentage, let's say 65% or 70%, create multiple pods, create multiple containers. You can have that kind of a scenario, set alarm set, and things can be taken care automatically. You don't need to do it manually. Okay, so there are container orchestration engine, so which can be helpful if you have a lot many microservices and deployment. And network performance, yeah, it could be a problem if you have, if you're trying to achieve high availability. Like if you have anyone from cloud background, you know that we deploy pods in various AZ, availability zones, we call it AZ. Okay, if you have one microservices in one AG and other microservices in another AZ, Okay, AZ is data center. Okay, basically different data centers. There could be a network performance delay. There could be a latency there. Okay, so you need to make sure that if you have something going on between two microservices, have them in the same AZ and have multiple such configuration in different AZ for high availability. Okay, so to mention it, so the disadvantages are not like you cannot manage. You just need to be good. You need to implement it wisely, logically, to overcome this disadvantages. But any day, microservices are much more powerful implementation and reliable implementation as compared to monolithic. Uh, Now we have understood both monolithic and microservices. We can understand the comparison now. Here, processes are tightly coupled. Yeah, that's where we have understood, and run as a single service, right? That's how it is. And here, one service per process. That's how. And we deploy your microservices in the container, and we have only one service per process. Adding features becomes more complex. Obviously, even if you want to add something, you need to deploy the entire code base. But let's say you are just trying to add something to one module, but you have to deploy the entire code base, all the modules, to get it up and running, right? So that's the case with monolithic. But here, if I know that I'm changing something to one module, I'm just thinking about that module, because my other microservices, other modules are independent, right? So I'm not worried about that. So well, I'm just working about a single function. Each service performs one single function. I'm just thinking about that particular microservices. Add risk for application availability. Yes, because even if one of the modules is not working for any small region, smallest of the region, uh, the entire application can go down. It has that threat, risk always. But here, uh, it's not a problem here. It can be updated, deployed, and scaled rapidly to meet demand. Okay. Now the next question. Okay, so that's all about the theory part on the monolithic and microservices. If you have any questions till now, I'm free to you can discuss with me if you want to speak. If not, I'll go to the next section now. Okay. Silence means we are good. Perfect. Okay, so the next question. Where do we run these microservices? Okay, fine. I was talking about a lot about microservices, that lot many disadvantages. Where do we host this? We can host microservices on the physical server, right? We can do that. Big physical server, we can do that. We can host the microservice on the VMs, right? Because what happened now, since we are talking about three-tier architecture, three-tier application, what we do, that we use virtualization, right? From the physical server, we install a virtualization software like hypervisor or VMware software, and then we virtualize the physical server, and then we create VMs, right? Virtual servers. We change, we make that, and then on each of the VMs we deploy our application. Let's say in one VM I deploy my application server, in one I deploy my web server, and the other I deploy my database server. Three servers are required here. So similarly, that's about the servers. Right? So in the same case, uh, I have the option to running my microservices on the physical server as well, on the VMs as well, or there is something called containers, or we can run them in containers. Okay, there are three options. I have got a question here. Just okay. Okay. So container Kubernetes. I was talking about the SAN. I'm talking about deploying, running microservices. Okay. So when I talk about running microservices, I'll come to the conclusion that we should run the microservices in containers. Okay. That's how the resource will be highly utilized. Okay. When I say containers, okay, so when you have, so you can deploy your microservices in containers. Good, you got it up and running. But when you want to orchestrate, okay, orchestrate the entire all your microservices. Orchestrate means You want to auto scale the application, right? Auto scale the microservices if there is more load. You want to auto load balance. If you have multiple VMs, you want to load balance the traffic across all your VMs, right? You want to auto scale the containers if there's more load. Who will do this? Kubernetes does that. Okay. So that's how when you want to manage containers, okay, when you want to manage containers where microservices run, okay, when you want to manage, you need a container orchestration engine like Kubernetes to manage your infrastructure. That's when Kubernetes comes into picture. Okay. So I was talking about this, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
one small doubt, bro. Still, I'm not clear. Sorry to disturb. It might be silly also, sorry, because I want to get the clear picture. So we talked about the containers. So container will have the microservices, right? And this will be managed by Docker. Or how that architecture, can you explain that? Because now I got to know the container contains the microservices. And Docker means, so what is that all about? So whether Docker controls the containers or how?
okay. So Docker is called a container engine. Okay. So container engine is what, see, okay, I'm going to sidetrack a bit, but I'm going to answer that. See, on the physical server, okay, what happened back in 1980s, what used to happen when this IT industry started, when they developed their one small application in few KBs or MBs, they deployed the entire application on the physical server. It was having a lot more resource. Okay. So just mind my words, a lot more resource, a lot many CPU, a lot more virtual memory, a lot more everything. Resource was huge, and they used to deploy a tiny KB application. So it was not a good thing, right? A lot of resource was getting wasted. Someone realized that why are we wasting this? So they come to a solution. Let's install a hypervisor, a virtualization software, and let's create VMs, multiple VMs, breaking down the same infrastructure, same server. Let's say if this server has 10 threads, 10 vCPUs, okay, let's say assume that. So I can create 5 VMs with 2 vCPUs each, right? Something like that. And then what I can do, I can deploy my this application to in one of the VMs. And then I get to save a lot more servers, and then I can use these servers to host some other application. Okay, that's about the virtualization, that's about the VMs. Now, this container engine, what they do, they sit on top of the VM and they containerize your VM, and then you can host multiple containers inside one VM. Who do that? Your container engine. So container engine gets installed on the VM, and then you can have multiple containers running on the VM itself. So it is the revolution phase we are into, okay? From the physical server to virtualization, where I get to create a lot more VMs. Now from one VM, I can containerize that VM, and I can use who containerizes that? Container engine, like Docker. Docker is a container engine. Okay, there are other container engines as well. Docker is not just the only one container engine. Okay, there are other container engines as well. We have Podman. Okay, a lot more. Okay, a lot more. We have container engine. Docker happens to be the most popular container engine. So what we do, we install a container engine in one VM. Okay, and then we containerize the VM, and then what we can do, we can have multiple containers in one VM itself. That is what we are talking about here. Okay, and in that case, what was the need from going from physical server to VMs, right? A user resource utilization, it was a so costly thing to host 1 KB application on this big box. It was not at all advisable, right? A lot of wastage of resource, costly affair. That's why we came up with this VM, and I could host 100 of such application in this VMs. Now I have multiple VMs, so I can use multiple VMs to host my multiple applications. And now I have containers, so I can use only one VM. Let's say I have three servers. Earlier, I have three servers. One is for app server, one is web server, one is database server, right? Now I can have three containers for each, for one for app server, one for web server, one for database server, and I can host my three containers in the same VM itself, only one VM. Only one VM is required to host my application. Can you understand that it's a much more efficient utilization of resource. So all are we talking about efficient utilization of resource when I'm talking about containerization. Efficient utilization of resource. That's where you're saving the money for your organization. And that is why we are talking about container engine and Kubernetes. And when you have a lot more containers to manage all your containers, you need a container orchestration engine like Kubernetes. Auto scaling. Who will do that auto scaling? When the load is increasing, will you do it manually? Will you set in production to do it manually? Oh, users are hitting more. Let's scale. Let's have more containers. Would you do that manually? No, you don't do that manually. You have a container orchestration engine like Kubernetes to do that for you. Okay. So I hope everyone understood the clear picture here. Okay. So now I have talked about enough. Okay. So now containers, right? So where do we microservices run? Now I've answered that question, that we run microservices on the container for the efficient utilization of resources. You can run microservices anywhere, here, but ideally, where should you run that? In the containers. And to do that, first of all, I will have a VM. I have a VM right now. Okay, I have a VM. Let me show you that I have. This is my AWS console. Okay, I can create VM here. VM is just an instance for me. Okay, so you can see this. I have a VM here, name workshop, and I have a AWS console. Okay, so I have a VM, and this is, I have logged into this VM. Okay, this is my. You can just check the private. This is called private IP. You can just check this. 172.31.11.186. This is my private IP. Okay, and this is my public IP. I have connected through PuTTY. Okay, I have logged into my VM through public IP and using the key. I am a regular performance tester. All these concepts are going out of my brain. I'm talking in a very simplest of language. And if you are a performance tester, you must be working in one application, right, Kapil? Right. This is the basic. It cannot have more basic than this. Okay. If you're not understanding everything about container, that's fine. If you have understood microservices, monolithic, I'm good. That's what you expect to know. I hope you have understood that, Kapil, right? What is monolithic? You must be working in some application, right? So now at least by me explaining monolithic and microservices, you can mention me, you can tell me that which type of application you are working, right? That's what I have covered till now. Okay. If you have understood till that, if you can answer that what type of application you are working currently or doing performance testing, in what you're doing, you must be doing, I assume you must be doing some kind of scripting in some use case, right? So you can now tell that what application is it? It is monolithic or microservices. If you can answer that, you're good. Nothing could be more basic than that. Okay, this particular thing. I'm talking about a lot more stuff because the questions came up, Kubernetes and all. So don't worry about that. I have not mentioned that in my slide. So whatever. So I'm just not talking about microservices and how do we host microservices. So we host microservices in containers, and now I'm going to show how do we create containers and things like that. I don't know why are you worried about containers and Kubernetes. You have to learn one day. Okay, today or not tomorrow. You have to learn one day. Okay, fine. Okay, so this is my EC2 instance. This is my VM, one VM, and I have logged into that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to create containers here. because for that I need a container engine. As I mentioned, right? When you have a physical server, then what you do, you install. Okay, let me make things. Okay, very simple. This is a physical server. Okay, a lot. And then what you do, you install hypervisor or any virtualization software on this physical server. And then what you do after that, you can, once you install any virtualization software like hypervisor or VMware, you can create multiple VMs. Okay, from this physical server, you can split this VMs. You can create multiple VMs. That's what I was showing in that other slide, right? This is called one VM. So Kapil, you must be using some application server, web server, right? In your database server, you must be state of performance testing that. So know that there has been hypervisor software on there. There is a bigger box beneath your, for your, let's say it's your app server, web server, database server. There is a bigger box. On top of that, someone has installed a hypervisor software, a virtualization software, and then you are getting to create your servers. Okay, your app server, web server, database server, and that's all I'm talking about. Exactly, Devanshu. I hope you understood it. So I think Kapil is new to this, all these things, so that's fine. Okay, you create VMs, right? And now what I'm going to do, now I have multiple VMs. That's what I'm doing. Even AWS, what they do, they have a bigger box, bigger physical server, and they have installed a hypervisor software. And when I launch and create an instance, I get to create EC2 instance. That is a VM for me. Virtualization has been already done, and I get to create a VM. Okay. Now I have a VM now, and now how do I, if I want to install, deploy a container, how would I do that? First, I need to have a container engine installed. That's what I'm talking about. I need to have container engine installed, and then I can create containers. Same thing. Virtualization software is required to create VMs. Container engine is required to create containers. Analogy, okay. Perfect. Okay. So this is the example. Okay. That's what, see, you have a VM in one place and then you have a container here. Okay. What I'm doing here, this is my physical server, the highest, the bigger box. Okay. The big box. What I have done, I have installed a hypervisor. Hypervisor is a virtualization software. Okay. Nothing which can virtualize your hardware. That's called virtualization software. And once you have installed this hypervisor, you can create VMs, VM1, VM2, VMC. This could be my application server, this could be my web server, this could be my database server. And in that case, you know that if you have that for those VMs, you need a operating system, separate operating system, right? You can relate things if you're working on an application server, you know that application server is a Linux based or Windows based, right? It is having one operating system, right? And then on top of that, I have some binaries and library, and then on top of that, I can deploy my app server, my web server, my database server. That's how the VMs work. How this container works. So now I have a one VM. This is my one VM now. Okay, this is my one VM. So this one VM is here, and this is the host operating system. There is a host This is my VM. Okay. So this is my VM, one VM. I have an operating system here called Ubuntu. You can type this uname. You can find that I have one operating system here that's called Linux operating system, and that's Ubuntu. If you want to know, it's Ubuntu operating system I have installed on this VM. Okay. Once I have this, so what I can do, I can install Docker or container engine. Once I install that, I can create multiple containers inside only one VM. Basically what I'm saying, I can create a container for my application server, I can create another container for my web server, and I can create another container for my database server. So what I'm trying to achieve here, I'm trying to efficiently utilize my resource. I don't want to waste my resource. That's what the things have been doing. Earlier, back in 1980s, they were using one physical server, big box, to host one few KV application. Someone realized that why can't we virtualize this? Virtualize the hardware. So they virtualize the hardware. They create multiple VMs. Now we were hosting our different applications on VMs, app server, database server, web server. Now someone else realized, why can't we containerize the VM? So you notice that I don't have operating system here. This is to notice, okay? This is what you should notice, that for the containers, for different containers, I don't have a separate operating system, like in the case of VM. If I create containers inside one VM, I'm not going to have multiple operating system. That's what the importance is. This container engine, this container engine, Docker, what they do, they virtualize the host operating system so that my containers can use this operating system and can run. In the case of hypervisor, they were virtualizing my physical server. They were virtualizing my hardware, and that is why I could create multiple hardware here. I could virtualize this, virtualize the hardware. Here, I am virtualizing the host operating system. That's why I don't need different operating system for my containers. Okay. Uh, if you have understood this, it's a good deal. Okay. If you have understood this part. Okay. Okay. So you can have containers. Good, San. If you have understood this, good, perfect, good to know. I hope, Kapil, it's making sense to you. I can hope that. Okay, so this is your app server, this is your web server, this could be your database server, and this is my containers, container 1, container B, container C. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you live here. I do not have any container engine right now, okay, in this VM. I do not have it. If I type Docker version, let me show you. I do not have Docker installed here. If I type Docker doesn't exist, Docker doesn't, I do not have Docker installed. So let's install Docker. Okay. So what I can do, first thing, in Linux, what do you do in Windows? First, you upgrade the Windows. I have just brought this VM. Let me update this VM. I'm going to just, okay, I understand. Let me be root user. I'm currently Ubuntu user. I'm going to be root user. Then I'm going to update this. This is same as what you do Windows update, right? I'm doing the same thing, nothing else. In Linux, this is how you update the operating system. In Windows, it's easy. You just click on Windows Update and you relate things. But here, we just do apt update. It works fine. Okay, so now I've updated the operating system. What I can do now, I can install the container engine. To install, I use apt install docker.io. This is what I do. Now I'm going to install a container engine. It's as simple as that. I am installing container engine. Okay. And now after installing container engine, what I can do, I can create containers. Okay. Let it install. Meanwhile, I'll discuss something. Okay. So this is what the difference between the VM and a container. So I'm just installing this part. Okay. If I do not install this, I cannot create containers. So I'm installing this to create containers. Okay. Uh, what's the advantages of containers? Very lightweight. It doesn't need operating system. Okay. It doesn't need operating system, separate operating system. Big issue. What is the big issue? Will be redundancy. One VM failed. Yeah, that's good point, Muhammad Islam. But what I will have multiple such things, multiple such nodes. When that is why I need Kubernetes. Okay, Kubernetes will also make sure that if my node is not working, it will spin up the another node as well. It can create another node. So I will not have just only one node. I will have multiple nodes. That's how I achieve high availability. That's how I can claim for high reliability. That's how my application is highly resilient. I will not depend on only one node. I will not depend on only one instance. Okay, I will have multiple such things. I need to learn Docker. Yeah, you need to everyone needs to know that if you're a performance test, because it's very simple stuff. That's how it is. Okay. So what is containers? The runtime environment for microservices. Containers virtualize the host operating system. Okay, I'm gonna come to that. What is that question? Docker contain image of operating system. Docker contains, it's a container engine. Okay, it's a container engine that can containerize, that can virtualize your host operating system. Understand this. Docker is virtualizing your host operating system so that your containers, separate containers, they don't need separate operating system. How this container would be using this, because this guy here will make sure that this container will have enough binaries and library which it needs to run. And who will do that? Docker would make sure that the common, this host operating system will be available to all these guys. The binaries and libraries which this container requires to run will be made available by Docker from host operating system. It will give this container, this Docker will provide all the binaries and libraries it needs for the containers. That is what it will virtualize the host operating system. Yes, yes, they are fault tolerant. Okay. Okay, I'm getting a lot of questions here. Yes, they are fault tolerant. Kubernetes, yeah. Different VMs can run with single operating system using Docker. Not VMs, containers. Use the word container, okay, San? These are containers, not VMs. Okay. Here, these are VMs, VM1, VM2, VMC. This is only one VM, and these are containers. Okay. Let's continue. Okay. You can put your questions. So containers are independent of OS install of. No, they are not independent. Containers uses the binaries and libraries of the host operating system, and Docker makes sure that they have everything. The containers, they have everything what it needs. And where do they get those binaries and libraries? They will get it from here. So they are not independent. They uses the underlying operating system. That is why I'm telling this guy Docker virtualizes the host operating system. They uses it. Containers uses it. Okay. Okay. You will understand it more. Okay. Again, one more. Okay. Can Docker go down? Okay. This is out of context right now, Purnima. We'll talk about that. Okay. This is can Kubernetes Docker? Okay. This is out of context right now. Okay. Sure. We'll talk about that. Okay. Kubernetes some other day. Okay, let me just go over very basics. Okay, here. Okay, so what is this containers? So runtime environment for microservices. Okay, obviously, containers virtualizes the OS level. As you mentioned, this the containers virtualizes this OS here, and then you can create multiple containers. So basically, what I'm telling that you can have your app server as a container, web server as a container, and database server as a container. Okay. Very lightweight. Okay, it's a very lightweight. Okay, and boots up in seconds. These are the characteristic, and takes fractions of disk and memory. Takes very fraction. Okay. Portability, resource efficiency, isolation, better performance, scaling. All these are benefits. Okay. You need VM. Okay, you need VM to host your containers. It's not like containers. You don't need VMs. Where will you run your containers, right? Yeah, you don't need to you mention like that. You don't need separate VMs for all your servers. Okay, you mention like that need. Okay, you need VMs to host your containers, right? That's what you need VMs for. Okay, so that's what I'm showing here. That okay, The physical server, I'm going to take the question at last. If not, I will miss the important stuff here. People would be waiting for me to complete this. I'm going to take up the questions at last. You can push your questions. Okay. So this is called the containers here. You can physical server is there. On top of that, I have the host operating system. I have installed container engine, and then I can create containers. I'm going to show you that how I create containers. Okay. So now I have the Docker installed here. Okay. If I type Docker version, I have the Docker installed now. I have Docker means container engine. So I have it here, the client and the server, both I have it. Okay, Docker having both needs the server client server. It's our architecture Docker is based on. So I have got both the versions. So what I can do, I can create containers. How do I create containers? Okay, you can just see the version of here. The Docker client version is this, and engine version is this. How do you create containers? That's the important question. So what you do, your microservices you need to have in the form of image. That those are called Docker image. Okay, Docker image. Okay, Docker image. So what do you do? And you have Docker image here. Okay, let me show you that you have something called hub.docker.com. Okay, hub.docker.com. You have it here. This is the place where you can create your own repository. Okay, and you can push your image, Docker images here. Okay, let me go over one important stuff here. Uh, this this diagram here. Okay, this is how it works. Okay, so I have installed a container engine. Okay, it pulls the image. So microservices, we have microservices in the form of image. Okay, you pull the image from Docker Hub, you get the Docker image. When you run the Docker image, it becomes container. As simple as that. Okay, once you have the container running, you can stop the container and you can delete the container as well. So Docker engine is doing everything here. It is pulling the image from the Docker Hub, the one I was showing you. This is called here. You can have. Let me just sign out. In this I have logged into my repository. So so this is how once you log in hub.docker.com, and you can have a lot more images. Like for a web server, right? You have something called HTTPD. Okay, this is a web server. HTTPD is a web server. You can pull this. You can just type this command docker pull HTTPD. What it will do, it will pull the image, HTTPD image. And what does this HTTP image has? They have the microservices, web server. It has the web server. And once you run that web server, you are running a web server. Okay, let me just do this. Okay, I'm going to I hope you guys can see my screen. I'm going to docker pull. If I type docker images right now, okay, docker images, I do not have any image right now. Okay, let me just put docker pull httpd. Okay, so this is a docker image httpd which has the microservices for web server. Okay, you can create your own image. If you're working in your application, if you're working in a mono microservices, you would have your own image, which would have your own microservices, your company specific microservices. Okay, if I type docker images now, I got one image. I have one image of this much of size. Okay, so now if I run this image as I was explaining in this diagram, Docker container lifecycle. If I run this image, it becomes container. Okay. So how can I run this? I can just type docker run -it. IT is for the interactive mode. D is the daemon. I want to run that in the background. -p because this is a web server. I need to do a port mapping also. I can run on any port like 82 port, and this 82 port of the microservices of this container would map to 80 of my host. Okay, I need to this is called port mapping. So basically my microservices, my web server, this HTTPD would be hosting on port 82. I would show you, I would show you a web server up and running, and I would show you a web page which comes after I install that. Okay. So just for now, no, I need to run this -IT for interactive mode, D is the daemon, P for port mapping, and I am port mapping 82 port of the container to 80 port of my host. Okay, and now I'm going to type my image name, HTTPD. Hit enter. Now I have got one container up and running. This is my container. If I type docker ps, so this is my container. Okay, this is my container ID. I can go inside the container ID. Okay, I can go inside the container ID. And let me first show you. If this is my container of my web server, right? I was telling you, and they are running, and it's running on port 82, correct? Let me do one thing. Let me just show you. Okay, I'm going to take the public IP. Public IP, my public IP is this. Okay, of my server, and 82 port. If I hit this, I should get a web server up and running, right? I will not get right now because I need to change a security group. There is something called security group in AWS or any cloud service provider. I need to enable 82 port. Just like that, any port would not be accessible in cloud. Okay, you need to enable this 82 port. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to the security group of my, this is my server. I'm going to the my security group. Okay, let me go to my security group of my server. Okay, where it is. I think I can go to the security group. Looks like they have changed it. Okay, that's fine.
That is under network and security.
No, yeah, I can. I'm just looking for something else. See, so of this is called the AMI. Okay, this is called the AMI of my image. Okay, and this is called the security group. So this is called the security group. Okay, so I'm going to go here of my security group, and I'm in the inbound rule. What I'm going to do, inbound means incoming traffic. I'm going to edit this. Okay, and I'm going to add a rule that enable port 82. Okay, and it should be accessible from anywhere. Okay, I can mention that, or I can specify only my IP. Only my IP can access this. This is called security group configuration, and I can just mention HTTPD access, just for my understanding. Okay, I'm going to save this. Okay, so I've added port 82. If you look at the inbound rule now, so this port 82 is added for my IPv4. This is called anyone can access this. Even if I give you the IP of this, even you guys can access this. I can restrict that in cloud. If I going to this, if I'm going to just say hit this, okay. Can you guys see this? This is a working. I got my web server up and running. I can change this text. If I go inside the container, there is a file called index.html. If I go inside the container, there is a file called index.html. If I change that, this would change. Okay, the display would change here. Okay, so what I'm showing you that this is called the container. So I'm showing you that I have a VM. This is my VM. Okay, this is my VM. And what I did in this is my VM. And go to instances. This is my VM. And what I did, I install a container engine, Docker, on top of this VM, and I created a container. You can create multiple containers. What I can do, I can install a database server. Okay, I can install a web server, Tomcat. If you want to find what image to search for, I know that if you want to, let's say MySQL, if you want to install MySQL, just do Docker pull. First, you need to pull MySQL. So this is the command to pull MySQL. This will pull MySQL from the hub.docker.com. And once you run this, you will have a database server in the form of container. Similarly, you can have your app server as well. You can go to this guy here and you can search for MySQL. A lot more images are here, okay, in the form of you can have JMeter. Someone was working on the performance testing here, right? I'm not sure if Kapil is still here. What you can do, Kapil, you would have installed JMeter on the VM, right? If it's a Windows VM, you downloaded the binary and you're working on a scripting. What you can do, you can have JMeter in the form of container also. You can run JMeter in the form of container, but for that you need to have Java installed as another container, because JMeter depends on Java. So if you pull this and if you run this JMeter, you can run JMeter in the form of container. You don't need to in just the way you are doing. You're downloading the zip file from the JMeter downloadable folders, right? You don't need to do that always. You can run this JMeter in the form of container. A lot more things can be done, okay? And let's say, okay, I'm going to do one more stuff. I'm going to, so this guy is downloaded here, okay? So if I type Docker images, you can see that MySQL, if you run this MySQL, you will get one database server as well, okay? So you can have application server as well, Tomcat, right? I have done these two, web server. I have talked about web server. I have talked about database server. You can install Tomcat as well. Tomcat is a web application server. Just do this, Docker pull Tomcat. This now and run this. So you have your app server, you have your web server, you have your database server. You can in only one VM, where you require 3 VMs to install it, to have it individually in all the VMs. Now, in only one VM, you can have 3 containers here. You just need to run it. Now Docker images, just check it, how many images you have it. And you just need to run it. Now you have 3 images. One is for the web server, one is for the application, one is for the database server. And you can run it and you can make one good application. You can install WordPress website. You can do wonders. And why this is being done? Why are we doing? To efficiently utilize the resource. That is the entire motion. That's the entire idea. That's the entire thing to achieve. I want to efficiently utilize the resource. I don't want to waste my costly resource. And if I can achieve that by containers, now I can just look at that, right? In the case of VM, I required operating system, separate operating system in the VM. In the case of containerization, am I installing any separate operating system? Am I doing that? No, I don't need to, because the container engine here, Docker, virtualizing the host operating system. Whatever it needs, this container, whatever it needs, this guy is providing that. And who is doing that? Container engine is doing that. Okay. What you can do, you can also run another operating system. I have Ubuntu here. What you can do, you can also run another operating system like Fedora. You can have another containers like this also. You can just download Fedora, because you know the difference, right? The Ubuntu is from Debian family, Fedora is from CentOS family. Okay, so now if I type Docker images, in Ubuntu apt command works, but in Fedora yum command works, right? So you can have this Fedora, you can just run this Docker run Fedora -d, just to -d, because I want to run in the daemon. Just run this.
Roshan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry, this is Kumar here. Sorry to cut you. I have something important I have to leave. Before I leave, I have this question. I really like the concepts and all that. So, is there
Right.
like a full-fledged course? I know this is a workshop, free workshop, but is there like
Right.
a full-fledged course that you're doing so that it would be helpful for me as a performance engineering to explore more on this? Is there anything like that? You're taking any courses? Sorry to cut you off in between because I
Sure.
have to leave, so
Sure,
I
Kumar.
wanted to
Sure.
ask this question.
That's fine, Kumar. Yes, I do have a course, and I cover all the topics here. So this is a part of ESA, and if you go over this website here, so esatrainingsolutions.org, and this is my course here, Cloud Performance Engineering in DevOps. If you go over this is the course I'm coming up with, and luckily that it's coming up a demo session you can attend on Tuesday. I'm going to cover AWS. So if anyone is new to AWS, so all my topics I'm covering from scratch. The way I explain here, the way from the very ground level. Okay. So AWS I'm covering. If someone is working, if new to Linux, if doesn't understand what is Debian and CentOS, what is Ubuntu and Fedora difference. So I'm covering Linux command line and for that, and then I'm using microservices in detail, and then Docker and Kubernetes full in detail. And I'm talking about EKS, that's AWS offering of Kubernetes, that's called Elastic Kubernetes Service, and then Jenkins, and then CI/CD pipeline. This is very much required for any performance tester who are trying to be working right now, because everyone is moving towards cloud. All the industries moving towards cloud and microservices, and this is very that's the main motivation of coming up with this course, that I get to explain everything here in detail. And you can go over the syllabus here if you like. You can go over a few demo sessions. I have taken these demo sessions in the last batch. You can go over these demo sessions to understand how I go over things. And then you have the entire syllabus here. Uh, so if you look at the AWS cloud computing, that's the thing I cover here from very basics. Someone is very new to cloud computing. What is cloud computing? Why do we need that? AWS, what is region? I was talking about some AWS console. I was working on the instance, how to create instances, how to work on IAM, how to work on VPC, EBS, EFS. These are the storage services. This is for the networking. How do we interact? How do we basically architect a solution in cloud? This is for that, from very basics, and I'm covering all the monitoring as well. Cloud, that's CloudWatch monitoring. That's very much important for a performance engineer. And how do we auto scale and and elastic load balance? How do we load balance the request coming from the users and to all my servers? So you can use elastic load balancer and auto scaling group. So I'm going over that. Then Linux command line, from very basics, all the topics. So that's the
So,
entire syllabus.
so do you touch upon Azure anywhere? Little bit of.
Okay, so okay, if you I'm covering here, see, I cannot cover the entire. If someone asks you GCP, difficult to cover everything, but I can show you that if you know
Basics.
one cloud, yes, if you know one cloud service provider, I can
Mhm.
relate things and I can show you what you would see in Azure. Okay, so if
Yeah,
you
sure.
just you need to be good with one cloud service provider, anyone, and easily you can learn others. Okay, so
Okay. So
I'm
how
talking.
much duration is the course?
This course would go for 2 months. It's a very long course, an exhaustive course. I go over each and everything from very basics. Even if you have a zero knowledge, this would work. And this would cover 50 classes I have. So around 45 to 50 hours of session I'm going to take. Then I'm going to talk about Docker here and software architecture, and then Docker, and then Kubernetes, container orchestration engine, Kubernetes, and then Jenkins, and then CI/CD pipeline, and how this performance engineering works in DevOps, and then CI/CD pipeline. And so that's the course. I'm going to quickly do these links here. You can go over on your, and you can
Sure.
attend the demo session. The demo session is on Tuesday, scheduled. Uh, it's
The
on
class is some
scheduled.
weekdays, right?
Weekdays, yes, weekdays, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. morning,
Yeah. Thank you.
IST, Indian Standard Time. Uh, you can convert Salman. I think it would be 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. IST. Yeah, sure. So that's about the course that I'm coming up with. You can get my feedback here from various people, how I go about stuff here. Okay, and then you can reach out to here this ESA Training Solutions at this number. That's the number on your screen. You can reach out to the person, Mr. Anand Gupta. You can reach out to him, and you can get enrolled. Get yourself enrolled. So everything is done from very scratch. You can go over this syllabus. Okay. I hope I answered your question, Kumar. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let's come to this thing. Okay. So now I was talking about that I have these containers. Okay. And now you can see that if you look at Docker PS right now you can see, okay, Docker PS. So now you can see that I have two containers right now, right? Where is that? Okay. So this is the container one I have, HTTPD. And what I can do, I'm not sure if I run this. Okay, I think so. Docker, okay, I have run this. Okay, let me just do this Docker PS-A. That will give me the entire list of services that's got exited. That's fine. So this is how now you can see this is called Docker images. So now you have 3 images here, and one is for the database, one is for the applications, and one is for the web server. And what you can do, you can go inside any of this and you can manipulate and you can change anything. And that's how you create containers. Okay, it's about just the starting phase is containers, but you need to basically learn about container orchestration engine. How do you manage? How do you orchestrate these containers? That's this Kubernetes concept comes in. And now, if you want to understand, as a performance engineer, we would like to understand the resource utilization, right? How much resource are being used. So type Docker stats. So what this guy would do, Docker stats is the command that would give you the details about the containers. So I have one container running here. Okay, I can have multiple containers running as well. You can use MySQL or any Tomcat. You can just run it, and you will have all the containers. You can see that the CPU, memory. I'm using this much of memory right now for this container web server, and this is the limit I have. I have 1 GB of RAM on this VM. I'm currently using this much of memory, and net IO is this much, and block IO is this much. And so you can find the statistics of the footprint of your containers here using Docker stats, and you can come out of that. And that's how basically you create containers on the VM. So what I was mentioning about that, now what you can do, you don't need to have separate operating system. Did I install any operating system separately? No, I just installed container engine, and then I created containers, right? A, B, C. And then why do we need this? Why are we doing this? To efficiently utilize our resources. That's why. Okay. So that's all about today, guys. I wanted to cover, and you can stop this container. You can delete the container. I can just stop this container. I can just type Docker stop this container. This container will stop now. Now if you type Docker PS, you would not see any container. I have stopped the container. You can delete the container as well. Docker delete command. There are a lot of commands are there. If you go over Docker, the Docker volumes are there, Docker compose. There are a lot many things. Just the basics, and to start to just show you that where do we run these microservices? Where do we? What's the runtime environment for the microservices? That's containers. Just to show you, I just demonstrated this. There are a lot more things here, as you need to understand as part of performance testing and engineering. People are asking nowadays these questions in any of the interview. If anyone is attending the interview, they can they know that they're asking because see, these things are very much practical microservices. All the companies are coming up with these microservices. All new startups microservices. Old companies, if they understand the value of microservices, they are trying to migrate from microservices, and eventually they would use Kubernetes, right? they would use a container orchestration engine, I would say. They would use Kubernetes or some Mesos or any other Kubernetes engine they can install, they can use. And you guys, then as a performance tester engineer, you guys need to work on those Kubernetes implementation. And if you do not know Kubernetes, it's very difficult to clear the interview also, not to work. They are asking these questions nowadays. And that's why Jenkins, CI/CD pipeline, DevOps, we'll talk about DevOps and how do we create performance jobs in Jenkins. That's all these things are there. It's required looking at the current trend. Okay. So that's all I wanted to cover, guys. If I have missed any questions, let me go over the chat. I'll just go over. Let me just to go over. Currently, I'm working on company Microsoft Azure Pipe and have similar idea. Do you know? Muhammad Islam, they have asked. Currently, I'm working the company Microsoft Azure pipeline. Yeah, so it's Azure. Okay, I was my course, the one I introduced. We're talking about AWS. Okay, and we are creating CI/CD pipeline there. Once you understand that, once you know any cloud service provider, any one, it's easy to understand others. I can tell you how to achieve learning about any other, not just Azure, GCP, Google Cloud Platform also. If you know one, there is a way you can do that. What is the approach to do performance testing of microservice architecture? See, again, you have two options. Microservices is a subset, okay? It's the sub module. Either you have a web page, something UI, or you have an API, okay? That's how it is, okay? And let's say if you have a JMeter, you can do both, right? If you have a UI, you can script it. If you have an API, you can again make sure that you have a right request and keys to hit right those many users, right? So again, either it's a monolithic or microservices. You have these two options. Either you have a UI, you can automate stuff there, you can script it. If you do not have an UI, if you have API calls, you can make API calls and load the system. That's what the performance testing would do, to load the system. And after that, it's all about server utilization, and that you need to troubleshoot it and understand. If it's a Java application, you need to look into different issues. You need to look into garbage collection, threading, how threading works, and there are all those things. So the concept wise is the same stuff. Okay. Cloud drill down to the. There are a lot many tools. Okay? Sam, you can check with ESA Training Solutions. They are this sharing the recording or not. You can check with them. What monitoring or profiling tools will be used for cloud to drill down to find the bottleneck? See, again, it's the same thing. Okay, if it's a Java based, okay, it's a Java based. You need a Java profiler. If your microservices are Java based, you need a Java profiler tool. Any tool that you use in on-prem. It doesn't matter in cloud. Cloud is what? When I say cloud, what do we understand by cloud? The servers which I do not own, which I take it for rent, which I use it for rent, that's called cloud. If you own the server, if you purchase the server, and if you have it on-prem, that's called on-prem. The way it works for on-prem, in cloud it works the same way. Cloud. So you need to learn one cloud service provider. That's the must thing. Point number one. You need to have one cloud service provider knowledge, each and everything about that. Because in interview, they will ask questions. If you are new to cloud, learn one. Okay, that's advice.
Rajan sir, one doubt. Actually, it's related to the same. As I mentioned, actually we are using Kubernetes, this one. So our system also available in cloud only. So they're using Azure. The thing is, like, while monitoring, right, we don't have any tools. So what we did is they have something called Datadog. So only few data only we can collect. So what I'm asking is that, is there any
Prometheus and Grafana?
Yeah.
So
Prometheus. Okay.
Know about that, Prometheus and Grafana, you can integrate that.
Yeah. Now what I did in the sense, I checked with the development team and we configured the Prometheus, but it is difficult for me to get that Prometheus data into the Grafana tool. Roshan.
No, it's easy. Once you configure that, it's easy to get it. So
we are using Spring Boot also. So from there, we configured. Yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
But you can, if you see, if you have Prometheus, they can scrape data from microservices or containers or pods. Prometheus is a very good, efficient tool, free tool you can use. Okay. So,
Okay.
sure. So that's all I wanted to cover today. So uh, try to attend the demo sessions. You would get some more insights about the cloud, and you will learn things from there. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining. We are on top of our time. So thank you everyone. See you next time. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.